Morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there on the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last of the 2024 series on police supervision. And this one's a little different. This is not actually a webinar. This is a discussion of the USPCA's Best Practices Working Group's 5-year plan. What we hope to accomplish over the course of the next 5 years by setting real, measurable, observable, milestones that we can say that we did or did not do this, because we think there are things that we can do to help make life better for canine handlers all around the world, but especially in North America and the United States. So that being said, I'm going to dive into this here. Consider this PowerPoint to be just an outline of the discussion that we're going to have, and it's not anything cast in concrete, but we'll give you an overview of where we want to go in this discussion through the following bullet points. So to begin with, our big goal, our primary goal, is to make the USPCA members the undisputed experts in canine matters. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have respect for other organizations and what they're doing, but right now, the USPCA is the largest organization in North America, and we want to make sure that with that standing, we leverage it to do the best we can for the police canine community at large. USPCA members in specific, but the whole canine community. We have all got to look at what we're doing and where we're going moving forward. And to do that, we're going to try and define what the ideal canine handler looks like, what the ideal patrol dog looks like, what patrol teams should look like and operate like, what it takes to be the ideal canine trainer, what it takes to be the ideal canine supervisor. And altogether, you should have a canine unit that looks like it produces what it should and dots its I's, crosses its T's, and gets the job done, finding people that are trying to get away. And we're talking specifically about patrol dogs. We're going to expand in coming years and talk more about detector dogs. But this year, we've been focusing on patrol dogs because that is where the harshest criticism is coming about the police canine community right now. And we want to go ahead and be as open and transparent as we can in our goal to address the issues that need to be addressed. So towards those ends, we've developed a pathway for growth. It's going to be based on 3 things: recommendations, products, and outreach. And so basically what we're talking about when we talk about recommendations, we want to talk about things that we recommend you do. And for example, towards that end, we'll produce a model policy. We'll also summarize some of the best practices, what we think are the ideal ways of getting things done. We'll also address what we think are appropriate changes to certifications to make them more operation-centric as opposed to competition-centric or just a static baseline test. We want to go ahead and see if we can help everybody who goes through a certification feel it better represents what they're prepared to do. Now, the products that we're going to produce, again, the model policies are going to come up because the model policies are going to actually be the backbone for the recommendations that we made. The model policies and what we think are the best ways to operate in today's modern operating environment will be produced with these policies, and we'll have articles to expand on them and illuminate what the rationale is behind elements of the policies. Newsletters will come out and share the information that the model policies are available, that articles are there, reminders and additional information that will help us do a better job as police canine handlers. In addition to that, we'll produce videos such as this and some more training-centric ones, some ones that are shorter, easier to digest, maybe more suitable for roll calls, and some also, again, continuing with some long format videos as well. Now, the outreach piece of this component of this pathway to growth is for us to look first at the police canine community around us. And toward that end, the peer organizations, the other organizations that are trying to do the same thing that we are in the USPCA, NAPWADA, IPWADA, NPC, a whole host of them are out there. But there are also state organizations that do this. In my state, Washington State, there's the Washington State. You go down to Florida, there's the Florida Law Enforcement Canine Association. You go look in different states, and the state government is involved in setting standards. In Washington State, our Criminal Justice Training Commission does. In California, Post has recommended guidelines, and they're going to shift some things in there. Other states do too. So we want to go ahead and contact those organizations and see if we can all kind of get on the same page about what are best practices, what are we looking to accomplish, where do we want to go moving into the future as we see standards and things start to change. We're going to go ahead and interface with police leaders. So we're looking at organizations like the IACP, the National Sheriff Association, the states, police chiefs and sheriff's organizations as well. But first and foremost, we have to cement our relationship with the public. And the public is one of those things that is huge. It's amorphous, and you try and do it. But the best way we can do that is by making sure that every day we represent ourselves with the ultimate in professionalism. The easiest way to do that is to really know and incorporate the best practices. Now, we're going to look at other affiliated organizations, for example, the American Kennel Club, the UKC. There are breed clubs and sport clubs. Even chambers of commerce in different cities find support for police canine. And we want to leverage those connections we have and make sure that we're on the best foot with all those people. Now, towards these ends, since this is a 5-year plan, we want to look at 2025 as our next year. And in 2025, one of the first things we want to do is we want to make the model policy freely available to everybody. We'll make sure that it's distributed to USPCA members, but anybody else can get a hold of it and take a look at it and see what we're looking at. Because we think that if you have a sound policy, it makes sense for everybody to know what's expected. We also will create best practice summaries in 2025 that will summarize elements of the policy, will summarize training concepts, will summarize tactical concepts and deployment models, and we'll go from there. We'll go ahead and try and make sure that the certification starts moving towards a more operationalized one as opposed to a certification, competition-centric one. We think that is what is expected of us by the courts, more so than that. And I know there's a certain reinforcing quality to going into the competitions. At the end of the day, though, we have a public to serve and a public that will pass judgment on us, and they want dogs that can actually do the work as opposed to perform well on a competition field. Not saying you can't do both. We're just saying that the certification should reflect the way we work more than the way we compete. Information sharing is going to be the next piece of this, and we're looking at the law enforcement organizations. We're looking at meeting with at least 4 different law enforcement executive organizations over the course of the year. If not, presenting to them at their annual meetings, something like that, or developing some kind of interface with them that we can formalize and have a document trail that says that we're working with you to help make Canine better for your organizations and your members. We're also going to look at state and regional canine organizations. Again, information sharing, trying to affiliate and find ways to get everybody more closely aligned with this. We don't think there's a cookie cutter, that it's a one size fits all about the way you do canine, but there are universal principles that we think that we can help people understand and figure out how to build their own policies around them. The state government certifying bodies are the other thing that we want to get a hold of. We want to find which states have certification rules, what those rules are, and how the USPCA aligns with them, and try and resolve any misalignments, either by suggesting to them that they make an adjustment or us looking at whether we need to make an adjustment. We'll strengthen the USPCA's inter-region coherence as well. We'll have more meetings between the regional presidents. We want to make sure that the regional presidents are really filtering the work down. So in other words, we take this organization from the president and from the executive director, from the best practice work group, those are recommendations, the model policies, and say, help them figure out how to best put those into practice in their regions, help their members do the best they can to make sure that we're all going out there knocking the ball out of the park on a daily basis. The final thing that we're going to do is we want to make sure that we produce products that are not just for our members, but also for our law enforcement leaders. We're looking at making sure that police chiefs really understand what it entails to have a canine unit, and they also understand how we have to go ahead and maintain the skills that we have. That is not a one and done thing, that anytime you're with your dog, one of you is training the other. And they have to understand that that takes a commitment, maybe that they didn't anticipate when they got in there, but that if they adhere to that commitment, they'll get results they never dreamed of. So that being said, we want to move on from there and really make sure that law enforcement leaders are on board with what we do with informed consent, fully understanding what they're getting into. Now, towards these ends, we've got to figure out what's going on. So you'll see that the year 2 through 5 milestones are blank. And what we need is input from the organization. Where do you see areas that you would like us to work on? Now, obviously the best practices working group has their own ideas about these things, but we want to make sure that we're in touch with the members and that the members drive our work. You set us on tasks, and essentially think of it as you get to define the strike zone, and we get to figure out whether things that we're doing are balls and strikes or not. Sorry for the baseball metaphor, but hey, season's over. What do we do? That being said, I'm going to pitch it to our group. Now, we have some of our members here today, but on the next slide, you'll see the membership of the Best Practices Working Group. If you have any questions, complaints, concerns, comments, suggestions, you can pass them on to any of the people on this email. When you hold up this page, you should be able to get the email of everybody that's involved in the group, and you can go ahead and get a hold of us directly, and we can give you answers, or we can put them to the group and see if the collective wisdom can work it out. Now, that being said, I'm done with the presentation. I'd like to put it back to you, Don, and to the rest of the group so that we can go ahead and talk about this. Why don't we, take the presentation back to where we were and talk about, those 3 prongs of the things that we want to create: the products, the recommendations, and the outreach piece. And first and foremost, on the recommendations, we have been talking about a lot of different things through the past few years, but one of the most productive things we've done is produce that model policy. And I have to give full credit to Scott Sargent and Gene Ramirez for putting it together and putting the polish on it and making it something that has global relevance to the police canine community. But that being said, have you guys got any more you want to go ahead and add about the model policy, best practice summaries, or anything like that? Don, you're up.
Yes, Steve. It's important to recognize that Gene Ramirez is our attorney, his reference, but Scott Sargent is a retired the commander of the use of force division, was a canine handler, but the use of force division in LAPD. And then after his retirement, he went on to become an attorney, and he works for the DOJ, and he works on consent decrees involving canine. And what makes this such a big deal for us is that Scott is improving the policies. He defined what the causes of the failure of a canine program are, and that's supervision, policies, and training. And these are the things that he gets from his work with the DOJ and work with us across the United States. So the main thing that we are doing, well, it's not the main thing, but one of the things that makes us important, we're able to go along across the country and find out all these deployments, look at all the different things that they're doing, understand that things that used to be okay 20 years ago are no longer okay. And we're trying to pass that on to everybody, that certain deployment tactics are not good anymore and they cause problems. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Don. Actually, the good Dr. Furlan is with us now. So I want to say that, he's the only one amongst us right now that has experience as a law enforcement chief executive. And so he brings a unique perspective that dovetails with that of Scott Sargent, who probably has as much or more experience reviewing use of force as anybody on this board by far and away. And then Gene Ramirez, who has more experience defending canine officers than probably anybody in the country. So that collective wisdom about dealing with, like, for example, the model policy. In his experience as a reviewer of use of force, Scott Sargent saw a need to clean up policy and helped his department do that. Gene has seen where people have run into problems largely because either A, they violated policy, but also just as likely, they were within bounds of a policy that was insufficiently clear or insufficiently didn't make the guide rails, the guardrails for us clear. So it all of a sudden it's very easy to go out there off track. Lou is the one that has to deal, with the end result of this. As a chief executive, he's the one who has to convince city councils to cut the check to settle things, or has to figure out how to handle the consequences of this. Do you have anything that, with regard to the model policy we have, do you have anything you want to add to that, Lou, about where you think it really pays off, where its relevance is, whether it's relevant to a broader audience than just our USPCA members, or what?
Listen, if there was one wish that I could pass along to every chief executive out there, and that is, look at the darn policy. Even a cursory look at your own policies from time to time is well worth the time, especially when it comes to the canine, right? I think we would all agree that canine, one of the highest liability, one of the highest controversial things that is going to be deployed in a police department. We always have to remember that the communicators of those events, the chiefs or whoever, are the ones that need to clearly articulate why force was needed, because we police officers work in a dangerous world. And the public needs to be reminded of that. And they need to have sometimes the dogs, the tools, to be able to deal with that evil. And they have to be reminded of that. And for the most part, the public is understanding of that. They know that they are putting good people in very ugly events, and they need to have the proper tools to do that. The policies, if they're good, they will tell the handlers and the people involved, this is what you can do, and these are the areas that we don't want you working in. And if there's any question, if you're doing something that is within policy, fine. But if you find yourself in a situation that the policy does not make it clear how you, the police officer, the dog handler, should act, you need to get supervisors. You can't freelance. You can't say, well, maybe this would be allowed, or, if it doesn't specifically say you can do it in policy, hey, you need to get some more minds in that matter before you deploy that dog.
So that being said, let's say put yourself in the position of a chief where he's got an officer who does something, and then the officer makes an argument that I was within the bounds of the policy. Here's the language, and this is what I did. It seems to comply with that as far as I can see. And the chief goes, yeah, but it just seems wrong. Is that a moment like where a chief should say, I need to look at my policy?
Yeah, but a chief can say, as long as the officer, say it's ugly and it doesn't look good, and the chief's not sitting well with it, or whoever, and they look at the policy and they go, yeah, but the policy does cover it. Listen, you don't fault the officer, right? Because the officer's not outside of policy, but you might blame the policy. You might say, we need to fix this policy, and you may chalk it up to policy error, meaning that you just didn't have a policy that dealt well with that situation. Obviously, you're not going to leave the handler out to dry, but you may find fault with your own policy, saying it fell short. That's why having model policies out there to review and to compare your existing policy is terrific to have, because that is like the thicker steel that's on the building, right? The model policy has been written because of all these other policies and all these other issues that found maybe faults or shortcomings in existing policies, and that was put into the model policy part. So if you take your police canine policy and compare it with some of the model policies that are out there, like Scott's, oh, you are going to be so much better off inserting some of that language into your policy, because that model policy has already had the experience of questionable dog deployments addressed within that policy, where you might not have that experience or that language within your existing policy. But that doesn't mean that the event may not happen in your jurisdiction. That's why you're wise to get that wording inserted into your policy, so that when it does happen, and I'm going to underscore when, because it probably will, when that event does happen, it is better covered under your policy.
So there are plenty of times I've witnessed an unseemly incident, and then the reaction of the department is we're going to change the policy, and next thing you know, they just on their own figure out, this is how I'm going to avoid this problem in the future, is by prohibiting this, and overcrafting their policy in such a way that they actually hamstring their unit from being able to do their job. And I think you point out, before you just succumb to the temptation to do that as a police executive, find something to compare it against and look at it. And this is, like you said, I like your reference about steel, because strawman arguments are easily knocked down, but steelman arguments make your arguments better. And having a steelman's policy come out there, it really is a big help. So that's good. Anybody else want to throw in on model policies and where they see them? I know, Mark, you've got a lot of experience with this, and so do you, John. And Lord knows Eric and Chris and Michelle have to put up with the constraints of policy on a regular basis.
Well, Steve, I just wanted to bring out that, first off, thank you for the nice presentation you did in the beginning. But this policy, the model policy that we're in the process of crafting, that Scott did a lot of work on, and Gene, it is specific to, I think, it's not overly specific. So in other words, I think it could be adapted to just about any state, any municipality, by just tweaking it a little bit here and there, by looking at your department policy if it was somewhat more restrictive or something. But it is a great template for a super good policy. And I think that that's something that's everybody in the country should be looking at. IACP, Lexapol all have canned policies, and they take into fruition a lot of the things that you guys were just talking about, Lou. But I think the policy that's being created right now and being supported by the USPCA is something that is a little more practical, and it's realistic because it comes from experience. Whereas I don't think the IACP and Lexapol, not to knock them, are specific about canine and don't have the background that we had in crafting that policy with Scott and Gene. Thanks.
Yeah, I think you're right, John. I think that one of the things I really like about this policy is that it leaves room for people in different areas with different community standards to craft something that will best serve their communities, while still adhering to the universal principles and universal standards that officers are expected when it comes to using dogs as locating tools and tools of force. So I think that's what's nice, is there's flexibility in it, without having so much flexibility that it's meaningless. It actually has some nice real guardrails on it. Kind of shift to the best practice summaries, and that's something that we're starting to craft right now, and we want to produce things that are quick cheat sheets about what we think are best practices. And I'd like to talk to the group about, what do you think are the sweet spots, the best practice summaries that we can produce that will give the membership the best return for the minimal investment. Those things where, if we solve this thing that happens 80% of the time, that has 80, it accounts for 80% of the bad outcomes, with something that they only have to make a small change with. What would those sorts of things be? Where do we get that low-hanging fruit sweet spot of stuff we can write summaries about and help people distribute to their fellow canine handlers around them, and the membership and neighboring agencies? Yeah, Don.
I think the record keeping is terrible, and it's because of past practices of not understanding how the court system looks at our records. So we, after taking a lot of shots across the bow, canine handlers uniformly, and that was myself included, and early on in my career, we did not put everything in the training records. And so we get attacked a lot by the training records. But the fact is that once canine handlers understand that their training, that their dogs learn a little differently than we do, they understand how to write the training logs so that they write it in a way that's acceptable in court, still gets their message across, and then it's designed then to help the handler train their dogs and understand when they need more training here, what failed, what didn't fail, and things like that. I think I think Lou would say if you go into court, the training records are bad because they don't include enough and they're attacked quite frequently.
So, trainers in the group, do you have something you want to add to what Don just said? Because he gave a response that's completely valid, at the same time that it's also primarily court centric. And do you think there's another layer to this that would actually improve our training and improve our ability to produce those records in court and justify what we do? Lou, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, you guys are bringing up a lot, and so let me bring this up. If to Don's point about training logs, and then I hope John is going to speak about scenario-based training after, but to Don's point about training logs, if I have records in your training logs where you write in, this is where I gave an announcement, this is in compliance of such and such section of our policy. This was the scenario that we went through. We did a mock of some canine Supreme Court case, and we just recreated that scenario. And that is what's in the training log. Or things like, the dog responded to the odor here. He didn't give a final alert, but this is where the response was. I'm trained to recognize when the dog is on odor because the dog does these things. If you have those built in to your daily training logs, or at least your academy, your in-service training logs, those are powerful lines, powerful sentences in a report to show that call that's being called under question is not the first time that you trained it, that you experienced it, and it's not the first time that you were able to draw a conclusion because of the evidence that your dog is providing to you. If you have that same scenario, so to speak, in a training log or a training log somewhere in pieces, that's powerful medicine for anybody to be able to justify that your dog was properly trained and that you deployed your dog in a proper manner. And I'll turn it over because I hope John's going to talk about scenario-based training, because I learn a lot from Captain Kerrick about scenario-based training, and I don't want to talk about it because he's more of an expertise on it.
Thank you, Lou. I think, today, if we're going to have a canine unit that's going to be productive and it's going to be professional, we're going to have to pick people at all ranks, the unit commander, the lieutenants, the sergeants, the canine handlers themselves, that are different than what we used to do in the past. We need not only someone who can work a dog properly, but we need intelligence, we need computer savviness, we need good report writers. And I think that's so important. If we craft a policy for this police department, whatever ABC police department, we have to do it so it works for that department. They have to keep in mind what their goals are. They have to have a buy-in not only from risk management inside the department, an attorney to review it. The trainer should have a say in it as well. and supervision. It should all be one big meeting of minds and toss it together and use these ideal policies that we're producing maybe as a template, make it specific to your department. The biggest thing is, I think the culture in Canine has ignored policies for years, if some didn't even have any. And now we have to get into the culture of the policy has to be like a Bible for everybody, not just the administration to get cops into trouble if they disobey it or they go outside the guardrails of it. But it has to be introduced in a classroom setting and be taught and really engraved in everybody's brains, including the trainers and the cops. And if we do that and we base our training on that and do scenario-based training with policy situations that might come up, we might be doing a big favor for not only the handlers to keep them out of trouble, but we also be doing it for the department. The agency will have less liability and the community itself will be better served. So I think that scenario-based training for me, after the basics are over in a basic class, scenario-based training should be practiced daily so that handler has to articulate a reason or multiple reasons why he deployed that dog before he deploys it. Not just a gut feeling. It has to be part of his whole mental attitude on a daily basis. We've never expected that from canine handlers that much before. So I think this is a culture thing we're going to have to change. Because if they do that and they do it properly, they're going to be going along fine. That's about all I have to add on that matter. Thanks.
So I'm going to talk to our canine supervisors right now. So I'm talking to you, Chris, Michelle, and obviously Mark, and we have all been canine supervisors in the past. When something goes wrong, do you feel like you have the ability to go into your training records and find the roots of that problem before it was made manifest in a bad way? Could you see like some things start to creep? And Erica, you should probably chime in as a trainer too. Yeah, Chris.
Well, just to answer that, yes, we do have that ability. We use a web-based program for all of our. It's called Dog Team Pro. I know there's a lot of them out there, but anyway, it's web-based, and that's what we use for our training logs and our deployment logs. It's real easy to, and that said, I also read all the training logs. We train once a week, bi-weekly, but one group every week, and I read all the training logs after they're completed by the trainer. And yes, I could, I'll try to catch something early. Really, the trainers will come to me before I even see it in writing if there's an issue with a dog or handler or whatever. So we try to catch it pretty quick. But yeah, I read them all, and then if you try to stay in front of that, because if there's an issue with the dog, you don't want it to spill over into a deployment. So we try to. That's what we use training for. I mean, John's talking about scenario-based training. That's what most of our training is. I mean, setting up and it could have been a deployment that one of our dogs had in the past, and we'll recreate it for the other dogs just to see how they would handle that. So we do a lot of that, and we try to stay in front of any problems that could come up. Because every dog has an issue with something, at some point. So addressing it, training through it, that's what we do. So
Eric, what you got?
I totally agree with Sergeant Butterfield. It's, as a trainer, you should be seeing these. Also, as a trainer, in the day of body cams, you should be able to review your handler, your teams, and their deployments. Generally, our guys are really, really good about coming to us with the issue and saying, or sending me a text, just saying, "Hey, watch my body cam. Tell me what you think." But we try and get ahead of it. It's look at it, see what the problem is. I think every department has been bit in the butt before. You got to learn from it. and try and get ahead of these things. The scenario base is great, but it's only great when you have good basic training. Because that's the issue. We set up scenarios for other departments who come out, and their dogs don't even have the basic skills to run the scenario. So if the dog can't run the scenario, how can I effectively run the scenario-based training? So it all kind of starts from the bottom up. And I think that's probably another topic down the road is training and where you're getting your training from. With Tulsa Police Department, we train our own dogs. So I know where they've been and how they've been brought up. But I think that's a whole new topic.
Yep. It certainly is. And it's one we can definitely do a summary on. I think we'll move on from the training record piece and ask anybody, are there any other pieces of low-hanging fruit you think the Best Practices Working Group should address for the good of the membership, for the good of the canine community at large?
I was going to suggest we're only as good as what we write in our reports, and that'll kind of follow suit with what Chris and Eric were just talking about, the basic training. I know a lot of our officers have done things in the past and made decisions based on a true mental assessment of what was going on, but failed to put it into a report. And I almost think that, they did their job, but they failed to articulate it in a written format. And I think in today's world, that's got to be an everyday occurrence on all jobs, not just the job they think they might have a problem with, or it was a tough job. It's got to happen from day one. And I think that the trainers of today are not only going to be training dog teams, but they're going to be training officers and supervisors also are going to be training officers how to satisfy all the necessary needs to have a deployment go properly.
Don?
I think one of our biggest challenges in the association is trying to devise or to help agencies of different sizes and how to instruct their canines to work. So I came from a larger police canine group. We had structure all the way down. We knew, our backup people were usually other canine people, our cover officers. So we don't have that now with the smaller departments because the chief of police may be the immediate supervisor, as we've talked about before. So there's who is going to be the cover officer, who's going to do this, how do you get the cover officers? So there's a lot of challenge in trying to disseminate information that best fits almost every group or every department that is looking at canine. And I'd like to just say to the people here that are watching this video, you can ask questions because that's how we find out what we need to teach next time, and we can help you this time. So that's why I think it's a challenge, smaller departments and bigger ones. Because it's for the same reason Eric just talked about. It's like a large unit, more trainers. Smaller unit, no trainers, just a canine handler. So where do they get their training from? Beginning schools for the new canine handlers are huge. You got to get the right ones because some of them are in for the money and they don't care as long as you can take the dog and go. So that's it for me.
Well, it's huge issues to be addressed. There's no doubt about it. Let's move on to the certification changes that we're thinking about and what we've done. And I know recently some changes were made in the USPCA certifications. Does anybody feel comfortable addressing that process, the way it went, how it unfolded, what kind of discussions there were, and what the results are? What came about? Eric, is that you?
Yep. Since I'm the national president, I should probably go ahead and talk about that. Overall, when it first got brought up, it was kind of a shock and awe. Didn't know which way that vote was going to end up going because the rule was proposed, and what I'm talking about is our mandatory recall. It was put out multiple times to region presidents, I believe. It was put out to the VPs. The VPs can easily talk about it. At first, it was shock and awe. There was, if I had to guess, 30 minutes of conversation in regards to it, into this specific mandatory deal. And the mandatory recall is at 10 yards. So it's a 10-yard running recall. The original, which is still in place for full points for those who want to compete, is at the 18-yard mark. At the end of that 30 minutes, and it was a healthy discussion. There wasn't anyone getting unruly, anything like that. It was a good, healthy discussion. When it came down to the vote, there were no nays out of the however many voting parties were there, which I can't remember without having to look at Mel's notes.
Wait a minute. You're telling me you got a group of canine folks to agree unanimously on something?
Yes. Yeah. Mark was in the room with us.
Wow.
And there was not a nay in the room. So whenever we get these feedback from other handlers and other this, that, and the other, well, at some point, your region president knew about it because the VPs were supposed to inform them of the possible rule change. And we had almost everyone there, and the option of being there on the via the Google Meet is always on there. We've started doing that here lately. I think Don started doing it 2 or 3 meetings ago, Don, where our meetings are now online for those members to be there, here, and they can still vote. They can still say yay or nay, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was pretty shocking that we didn't have a nay on that. And it also turned into a lot of conversation about trying to do more of a regional cert instead of a competition. So I think we had a lot of good conversations about it.
Oh, Executive Director, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I'm just going to build on Eric's comments. I think what is motivating a lot of this thing is administrators are now becoming more, have more insight as to how they want their canines to work, and how, and that then reflects upon what we're asking them to certify in. And so we are, what might have been the way we did it years ago doesn't necessarily coincide with the way police are deploying now, or way administrators want their dogs to use, i.e. we're getting more dogs that are tracking dogs, and the other thing is going to be just that they're narcotics dogs. So like you always say, Steve, there's trade-offs. What happens when he tracks somebody and it's a bad guy, really bad guy? So it's just, and I think that what they're trying to do is get out of liability, for doing something wrong. But I think there's a lot more going on with chiefs now that they're getting more involved, or commanders in the units, or the bigger units are getting more involved. And I don't want my dog to do this. I want my dog to do that. So we are trying to comply by trying to change some of the things that we do. Thank you.
The nice things about evolving certifications is this. We can talk about training groups and the differences in training groups, private, public, foundations, large cities, small towns. We can talk about all of that. But what gives us a nice baseline is a uniformed certification, because the dogs in New Hampshire or Massachusetts or Maine, where I'm from, certifying under USPCA rules will be at least the same fundamentally trained dogs in Tulsa, Raleigh, wherever, right? So we know that there's going to be at least a fundamental baseline in which the dogs would be able to perform, meaning that they have reached certain levels of training. So long as we keep evolving our certifications to meet the baseline demands of street work, right? Of what we anticipate, what is a likely call. And if we can develop the baseline actions that the dog team must have in order to successfully complete those tasks, whether it's use of force or whether it's a scent type of exercise, we would then be able to better assure that the dogs in Washington are at least on par with the dogs in the New England area at that level. And so our role, I think, as USPCA type of national organization, is to constantly create that baseline, that minimum baseline that all dogs should be at when they're getting deployed on the street. Other agencies can get higher, but at least that has to be that baseline. I am so encouraged that the USPCA is looking at certification rules and saying, maybe we can do better. I love it.
I'm going to throw the ball to Michelle if she's available to talk about it, because she works for a unit that I think is probably one of the more consistent. They have a very cohesive operating philosophy similar to Tulsa's within the unit, and they are a regional resource. And Michelle, have you got something you can throw in on this topic? If not, we'll. Oh, there she is.
Hey, Steve. Sorry, I just finished oral boards for a neighboring agency, so I was just driving.
Like I said, a regional resource. There you go.
Ask me again your specific question.
So, we're talking about changing certifications to be more operation centric, and we talked about the pros and cons, and Lou's kind of laid out some of the benefits to it. Eric talked about the realities about this. I think I'd like to get a police canine's, another supervisor's perspective, a first line supervisor's perspective on, we understand that there are differences between the static events of a certification and operations, but do you have a sense of the direction you would like to see certifications go to make them more operationally relevant?
Yeah,
more reflective of what we actually do?
100%. And I think the closer we can get to that, that helps everybody involved. It helps the membership grow. It helps the continuity. I'm a firm believer that case law doesn't discriminate. So what one agency does, it doesn't matter how regionally close we are. The circuits follow each other historically. So it doesn't matter what circuit you're under. We all have to pay close attention to decisions that are being made across the country. State to state, regionally based, or neighboring agencies. So my vision for the USPCA, I would like to lessen the gap between training for certifications and training for real world deployments. And I think the change in recall is a great step in that direction. We've had a lot of other good ideas. I don't know how many details you want to get into in this platform of some suggested changes that would lessen that gap as well. But I would love to see that happen, because I think everybody is to benefit for that, so that when we're going to train, there's never a question, are we training for certifications or are we training for real deployments? It should be one and the same, and you should be fine tuning things maybe a week or two before certifications come up, but there shouldn't be a difference in training approach if it's done correctly on both ends.
So in short, let's just kind of summarize. Your belief is essentially you should train for operations in such a way that your performance in operation would subsume the certification standards. You could go into any certification roughly with your operational skill set and pass it without a problem.
100%.
Bingo. That's the way it should be.
That's
Rather
excellent.
than training to test, we train to task.
And I believe in that so wholeheartedly. I put it to test, and this isn't to prove anything. If I train operationally that includes our certification standards, minus a few slight, I think, room for improvements, can I go into a certification test with zero preparation for that actual certification? So I did that last year. I showed up at a certification with zero preparation. I had just been training my dog for deployments in the street. I went for our new guys to observe what a certification looked like for a neighboring agency. And I showed up and said, hey, do you mind if I participate today? And they said, sure. I said, I'll pay whatever I need to pay for the fee. I just want to participate and see how my dog performs with no preparation to objectively judge what our certifications are doing in relation to our deployment and training methods.
Well, I'll bet you got some really useful information out of that.
And it was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
That's good. I mean, that's that's people. A half step in that way is a lot of agencies will do their own in-house certifications on a recurring basis that on a shorter cycle than the annual certifications maybe an organization would require or a state would require. They'll do it on a quarterly basis, but they're always cold. You don't know when it's going to happen. You're just meet me here. Okay, we're going to do it. Right. And that's one way to keep people operationally in tune. And so, yeah, I like it. Moving on. Let's move on now. And let's talk about the, I think the newsletter and videos piece, we can kind of push aside because everybody knows when those things come out. But I want to talk about this outreach piece to peer organizations in specific. And, there's a saying that the only thing two canine trainers can agree on is that the third canine trainer is doing it wrong. They can't even agree on what he's doing wrong. They just know that whatever he's doing, it is wrong. All right. And I want to stop that. I want to invoke the, as an organization to build a culture of curiosity. Steve McKenzie, who was a NAPWADA certified master trainer, taught me that. And I'm willing to learn from a guy who was part of another organization because he taught me that curiosity is way more useful than judgment. So that being the case, Don, can you fill us in on outreach efforts? Who and what we should be trying to do to contact those other organizations?
Yes, I can. And well, as you know, that when AB 740 or 720 out in California came about, for those of you that don't know, we were strong behind the scenes of the California canine programs. And I reached out to the different presidents of the four organizations that are known nationally, and got together, and I talked to them about the idea that while we may be different in certifications, the rest of it, we're all the same. We want to have the best dogs. And I said, there are times when we need to get together and we may need to fight the same battle, or whether it's against a bad law or in training or whatever, and understanding that, and they all agreed to that. And then some of them really helped us out in the California case. I helped the California people out, I should say. This is an interesting time to bring this up, because yesterday the Napa Water Region Secretary called me up and says we need to band together on something that's happening against canine, and so I have been doing some of that today. But yes, it's starting to come together. All canine programs are basically want the same things. They want to have a good dog that works well, that does the employments well. What makes us different, and that's part of the problem, is our certifications. That's how you make yourself different back in the day, and that was part of the problem. So we're trying to erase that, and I think that sometime in the future we will be meeting actually in person with some of the other organizations to talk about things that are different and that maybe we can come across and be better with.
So does anybody on the panel have another peer canine organization operating in their area, and that they have to, what do you think the chances are you could build bridges with that other organization and we could find some way to work together towards the common challenges that we face? And and what do you think would help build those bridges? Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, and I'll let Eric speak to this too, since he is a trainer and he has trained with these guys. Broken Arrow Police Department, which is a city that neighbors Tulsa, they're NAPWADA. But we have worked with them in the past, a recent past. Eric doing some building searches and whatnot, and there wasn't any. outward animosity or anything. I think it would be pretty easy probably to build a bridge and to learn some of the ways they do things. And I think they'd be open to it too. I mean, their trainer, he seemed real easygoing and whatever. So I don't think it'd be an issue for us.
So would it be fair to say then, from your perspective, probably one of the easiest ways to have, or at least a way that could be pretty effective, is for there to be more effort from the membership wherever they're distributed to make those inroads at the ground level and let it filter up to the top rather than trying to make our connection strictly at the top and work its way down?
Yeah, I definitely think that could work for sure because yeah, go ahead, Steve.
No, and it doesn't need to be either or. I mean, Don can go ahead and talk to his peers. Eric could talk to his peers as presidents and leaders of those organizations at the same time that Eric, in his role as a trainer, is talking to other trainers at the trainer level. You know, that Michelle, in her role as a supervisor, can be in touch with those other agency or those other organizations, supervisors, and trying to make the network really strong, both from the top and the bottom.
I think it's a very easy thing to do. Whenever there are rumors going on a couple of years ago that Oklahoma was going to have a bite dog certification, basically a patrol dog certification. And the rumors got bad enough that I'm like, all right, maybe we all need to meet about this, because we can't have one person or one group making the decision for the entire state. Especially whenever we're patrol heavy, where I'm at. And I think it was kind of neat that I didn't think anyone would really show up, and we had one classroom completely filled up at our academy, because everyone thought something was going to change in Oklahoma. So we all banded together for that one purpose. We're not going to change anyone's minds about certifications, but it is that we need to be on a working path with each other.
And it shouldn't just be in circumstances where you're facing a challenge like that you feel like you have to address it. This is going to work a lot better if we can figure day-to-day ways to maintain cohesion with them.
Well, and it's hard to reach the small departments. Those are the ones that's hard to reach. Those are probably the hardest. It's easy for us to get a hold of the large departments because we all pretty much operate the same, at least in Oklahoma. It's the smaller departments that it's so hard to get in touch with them.
In what way is it hard to get in touch with them?
Well, just getting them to meet up, or even you can probably get them on the phone, but getting them out to a classroom setting or a training day, it's almost impossible. Their chiefs, supervisors will not let them off. Most of them aren't even getting their training hours in because of manpower.
Captain Kerwick, Chief Ferland,
just a quick
can you
thing,
talk to your former peers about this?
Yeah. So, as the commander of a 50-team unit, I always encouraged everybody to join other organizations, not just the USPCA. We had the NAPAWATA to deal with. We had Connecticut Police Work Dog Association, were the three primary ones in the area here. And somehow I convinced senior leadership to pay for their memberships. So that became very easy for me to have everybody do that. The problem became at one point during a budget year, I could not make that happen. And it was very hard for the police officers to go out and continue that. It just didn't happen. So I really think that this is another culture issue. If we're all members and going to meetings and doing things together, we'll grow together a lot faster, and we'll come up to a standard that's workable for everybody. But senior leadership has to understand too that sometimes they could help us out with a quick $50 towards a team to get them to join another organization for the year and get the benefits of another certification or get the benefits of networking with other people. It's really important because canine is not a part-time job. It's a full-time job. And it's important that we get that message upward to senior leadership and to acquire a budget where we can actually have our people take part in everything. And at least if they don't take part of it, at least be aware of it. And, that's where I stand on that. Thank you.
Yeah. You got something you want to add, Lou?
Well, we all come into our original group. How? Because we joined the Canine Academy and they all belong to the AKC, to USPCA, and we joined them, right? And that was our first introduction for me anyway, to USPCA. And unfortunately, I look at it more historically, meaning that generally if two groups are operating fine individually, which there are a lot of groups in the United States, canine groups operating fine individually, if the only thing that would threaten that is something external. So I'll give you the example of that California bill there a couple of years ago, the first bill that went through, right? So California wants to propose a bill that would restrict the use of force dogs, and Dawn, alerts us to it, and AKC comes on board and alerts us to it, and they're saying, hey, we need to do something about it. And during this process, we find out, I don't know, what is it, like a dozen California canine groups in California? There's a whole bunch of them, and they don't even talk to each other. And they weren't even talking to each other when this bill was going through.
Yep.
It took AKC and Don with the USPCA to come in and say, yeah, you guys got to get your act together here, because you are about to pass a law that's probably going to, Michelle's point, that's probably going to come east. Somebody else is going to copy that thing, and you need to get your act together.
Well, they copied the law that was passed in Washington initially, or the attempted law that was modified and created in Washington. So that bled down from north to south, and then it'll go from west to east.
That's right, correct. But you can see how it takes an external event. It's like we're a big family, right? So, we don't talk to our cousins and we don't talk to our aunts, and we may have disagreements and stuff like that. But the second someone from outside the family starts talking about the family, now we all get together and we say, hey, you're not going to pick on the family, right? We saw that in California, right? All these different groups are operating until some external forces came in and said, hey, we're going to affect the family, or we're going to talk about the family. And now all the cousins and the uncles and everybody else got together and said, oh, no, you're not going to talk about the family like that. Sometimes it takes that external event, that external political event, to draw USPCA, Napa Water, IPA Water, whatever the groups are, closer together towards accomplishing a single purpose mission. And that would bring us together. In the interim, we just need to make sure that we have good relationships with all these different organizations. We are open to them whenever they want. They are welcome aboard. We proactively go to their things as well to keep the relationship going, so that if there is ever an opportunity or a threat, we are already at a better position to be able to combine our forces, to force multiply, to achieve the mission. But in the short term, we just keep moving forward. We keep moving for the individual improvement of canine teams, the better professionalism of training, deployment, and so on, leadership, and so on. We just keep moving our cart down the road, keep moving in a forward motion, keep leading as much as we possibly can. And if something should affect or disrupt that whole entire thing, we are already in a good political position and a good educational position to be able to say, this is how it should be fixed. And I just want to end with John's comment. John mentioned professionalism, and smaller agencies are having a harder time meeting the higher demands of especially our use of force dogs. And that is going to be, that needs to be considered for these small agencies that have use of force dogs. They need to be able to better figure out how are they going to be able to provide the expertise and training the hours required of training and the quality of dog team in order to successfully achieve the high stress, very dangerous environment in which the dog team is getting deployed. That needs to be looked at very closely for not just the small towns, especially the smaller agencies, but even the bigger agencies need to look at it too, but especially the smaller agencies. And the organizations like Raleigh, like Tulsa, or whoever need to be in a position of being able to mentor, or be able to absorb some of those teams that want to come into those bigger training groups so that they can get that higher level of professional training.
All right. I think the consensus is cross-pollination is a good thing, and not so that the USPCA can shape others to their will, but so that we can learn from them as much as they learn from us, and then we can work together towards the common goal that we have. All these organizations want to put the best canine teams out in the field that they possibly can. Any doubt about that? I don't think so. I think we just need to realize that complacency is easy to come by. I think that's why the uncles and cousins get together when you face a challenge, because when there's no challenge, it's pretty easy to just kind of get complacent and drift apart. So it's going to take us some work to build those bonds with those other organizations, but I'm looking forward to doing it moving forward. And the same thing goes with the affiliated organizations, like those state certification bodies. You know, Eric talked about pushing one back, and Washington State, we were lucky when they put certification on the canine community in Washington State. The Washington State Police Canine Association already had certifications in place, and they were able to go ahead and help the state craft a certification model that would work for most of the teams in the state. Due for, an evolution, but that process is still out there. We've got that model. What about our connection with other police leadership organizations? Like Don, you and John just had a successful presentation at the IACP. Scott, Jean, and I did one last year at IACP. But I think there are great inroads to be made with some of the smaller organizations, some of the statewide chiefs organizations, some of the like the National Sheriff's Association, that is just a U.S. organization, things like that. Anybody have some feedback on that? I think Mark, as somebody who, worked at the upper echelons, you might have some useful information for us on that.
I think it is important that we reach out to some of these organizations. Just about every state that I'm aware of has a National Sheriff's Association, has their own, each state has their own chief of police organization. And those are the things that we need to reach out to make all this information, all the resource of information that we have available to them, so that they can use it to help better their units. I think that's extremely important. And to get there and there's a lot of us out there, but I don't know that we can visit every possible organization out there, but we need to get some common thread that we can get out to them.
Well, we've got a goal for 2025 to contact 4 such organizations and try and develop a working relationship with 4 out of all the types that you just described in this country. I think 4 is a mark that's reasonable. It's a target we can hit. But if you or Lou or John had an idea, what would be the low-hanging fruit amongst those organizations? Which ones do you think we would get the most bang for the buck in terms of influence on helping them better understand and getting the broadest audience to better understand what it takes to really have and support a canine unit?
My thought on that is you got to run a few statistics to see if we could figure out where the most canines are per state, where it would have the most interest. The other thing I might use for a guide there would be California would be a state I would concentrate on, even though our membership is not big there. It seems to be ripe for some open-mindedness. New York has a lot, and where we would have influence. Eric may have great influence in the state he works in. That might be a place we'd want to operate too. Or Mark.
So what do you think about the notion of developing affiliate relationships with we could do this with the peer canine organizations, but maybe with the leaderships. In other words, we'll make an arrangement for you that if you're a member of IACP, NSA, or whatever, or any recognized state law enforcement chiefs organization or state sheriff's organization, that you'll get a discount on USPCA membership for yourself and your leaders, supervisors, for example. And maybe even, we create cross discounts with the peer organizations. Here I am. I may be getting myself in trouble about the finances of the USPCA and all that stuff. But I see that if we can incentivize cross membership, then all of a sudden they're more likely to see the newsletters. They're more likely to pay attention to it. I'm guessing. I don't know. Anybody have anything to throw in there?
Somebody's got his hand up.
Sue, it says Sue.
Hi, it says Sue. Tom Healy in Region 14. My thought for one possible organization to reach out to would be the Western Sheriff's Association. It's if they're still around, I believe they are. My agency used to meet with them annually on federal issues, but it's a fairly key group of Western states. So it'd be from the Midwest to the West Coast, but you'd reach many, many small agencies. And that's what we face in Region 14 is we're talking a one dog canine unit in an agency of maybe a dozen officers, including the sheriff and the undersheriff. And so those kinds of sheriffs are more apt to attend that sort of a meeting because it would be somewhere in the Western U.S. and they rotate around the states. And then certainly, as Mark mentioned, there, every state has its own state association. So anyway, that might be a way to be able to expand our reach to the West with perhaps one hit. And
I've written it down.
Is killing us.
I've written it down. I think I'll talk with Don about looking into it. Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate that. Anybody else got a recommendation? Before you go, you want to throw in on this before you have to bow out, Lou?
No, listen, whoever said it's individual to individual is right on too. We can do group to group approaches. It comes down to individual, right? And it's that needs to work as well. So the grassroots, exposure needs to happen at the same time that leadership is doing those outreaches as well. And I, for one, will do it.
We've had a good relationship. Don, you mentioned AB 742 in California and its successive iteration. We partnered with the American Kennel Club to help keep our fingers on the pulse of what's happening. They had somebody in the legislature, getting information about the progress on the bill, where it was going, understanding, essentially a lobbyist, and that worked well to keep us informed. Can you think of other affiliate organizations that are not law enforcement specific, not canine specific, that we could pair with?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I would just backtrack a little bit and say most of the national officers in different organizations are willing to talk to us and have great conversations. I think it's when you get down into the memberships the members are fixed in a certain way that they don't want to change. They don't want to do other things. I think it's not so much of a challenge to get other things going, but I think there's some things that we can do. Like this morning, I signed up for something on a national level with another organization. I talked to John Kerwick about it. And we want to get something going on that level, and it has to do with people talking about certifications from us who they don't actually have working dogs. It's a think tank kind of a group, and I want to get involved in that a little bit. But we have great, I mean, Lou and I just talked to somebody at the Chiefs conference, president of another association. He was willing to talk, happy, give us whatever we wanted. I mean, they're good people. They're just, the difference between us and them is all based on certification. That's what it is. Otherwise, we all want the same thing, a good dog. So we just have to keep persevering and get some contact in there and just start talking. I mean, I want to hear what everybody else is certifying, how they're doing it.
Mhm.
But everybody else.
I have it down in my notes with that president's meeting. We scheduled another all presidents meeting in January. I'm just taking notes on stuff that I can talk to them. Just seeing Tom on there from 14, that gave me just the idea that that's something I need to bring up. What do you have in your state? What do you have in your region? How can we better publicize this and get it out? How can we go about it? All, and Steve will also look into what you were talking about too, with the kind of like an associate type member where you can't really certify with us, but you can still get our information.
Right.
Yeah, I'll look into it.
I think Washington State Police Canine Association has regular membership and associate membership, and I think it's a valuable thing. It's good for the organization because actually some of those people who are associate members and aren't ones who certifies with it, though, bring us good ideas. That's it. I mean, it does become a good cross-pollination vehicle. So I'm pretty happy with that. And how about, public organizations? Like I said, we had this connection with the AKC. Has anybody had any relationship with sport clubs that, sport dog training clubs that look at what we do? Because I know that there are portions of that community that are very supportive, but there are also some that are very critical. They're very critical of, because the civilian training community has moved to force-free methods. They're very critical of law enforcement community's use of tools of force with their dogs. So the question is, can we build better bonds with public groups and have them, just by the fact that we understand each other better, they can be a buffer to some of the misinformation that's out there about police canine. Anybody got any ideas about that?
I mean, I don't have any ideas about that particular topic, but we are tied in a way with Penn Vet Clinic, who I think they're fantastic. And I would publish anything that they put out. So we've got our groups in, I mean, we've got guys in the federal government that are in our group, and then we'll leave it say at that. And sometimes you get good information from them. But outside, I don't know if we have that many outside that, like you just stated.
Why do you think that is?
Cops are pretty tight-lipped about that stuff.
What? Cops? Cliquish?
Mhm.
No, say it ain't so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll tell you that. It's funny. I just got into a little discussion with somebody over this past weekend because I chose, while I was still in law enforcement and both while I was in and out of canine, to work with civilians a lot. And it was interesting because I was flat out told, well, if you were a real canine cop, you would only work with canine cops and, police and military. You wouldn't work with civilians. And it's like, wow, to me, that's a completely foreign concept. Why would I not want to share information with them? Why would I not want us to interact with the public and help them better understand what I do? I mean, so where do we go with that? Because you're right. Look, I joke around about how when my daughter was being courted by the police explorers and the firefighting explorers, she eventually went with the firefighting explorers because they told her that, hey, if you're a firefighter and there's a party and you show up at a party, there's still a party. The police could, police are considered a buzz killer. All right. So yeah, she did that. She went the medic route. Now she's a nurse. But the point I'm making is that this is something that happens to us. There's a certain degree of ostracism we face, but we also put this on ourselves. So how do we, as the USPCA, or do we, as the USPCA, try and reach out to civilian groups to get more understanding, more mutual understanding? Is it worth it?
I don't know if it's worth it, but it's worth a try. But there's more bad publicity that they see, so it's going to be hard to talk to them about some of that. So, but I understand the shirt thing because that happened in my family.
So, if most of the news the public hears about Police Canine is bad, like the case that John just sent out this morning, all right, what do we do?
Public demos.
Public demos, absolutely. Because I'll tell you, public demos saved the Seattle Police Canine Unit back in the Canine Wars back in the 90s when the ACLU did a class action suit. We had little old ladies from nursing homes writing letters to the editor. We had school children writing, and their families writing letters to the editor supporting us because we'd done so many demos in schools and in nursing homes and in different community events. So you're preaching to the choir. So public demos are great. But also, I'll tell you that I'm in this job because before I ever saw it, before I ever knew what it was, I watched a Seattle Police canine handler just doing obedience with his dog outside a precinct, and he invited me to come in and watch and help. And I helped just by throwing a stick. But I was hooked. I mean, that moment I said, "Oh my gosh, this is a cool job. I want to do this." And here I am, almost 50 years later, still absolutely in love with it. So we can be that person individually.
You can do that, Steve, because my old unit goes to the state fairs. I forget how many days a week they got to go. Not everybody goes it, obviously, but there's a group of people that go to that. They have a group of people that help fund the projects of the Canine program, which hold different things that happen throughout the year in different places around the city and even out of the city, where the Canine unit guys show up and it's like a petting dog thing, so PD1's petting dog 1. And that's the way we used to look at it back in the day. So there's a lot of ways we're reaching out, not at the level I think where you would like to see us go. And for those that are new to this game, these videos, this is exactly what it looks like when we have our private meetings. We have these talks just like this to see how we can do better. So yeah, it's pretty tough. Pretty tough, especially now when they're doing more with less. They don't have the overtime to put people on the street, or they are running overtime because they don't have enough people to actually fill the slots, and money is bad, just like Eric said. So it's a tough situation.
All right, well, stuff we go on. It sounded like you were getting ready to say something, Don or Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to just reflect on what, maybe we're not doing it to the level that you're suggesting, but I think there's all kinds of different avenues that we've been doing to engage the public, the different organizations. There's speaking engagements that we do. We were big into Citizens Police Academy, to have them come in and then, be part of the Canine training aspect from that avenue. And again, speaking engagements that I remember doing standing up in front of 900 people and talking to them and going, wow, I've never done this before. But, so we do it indirectly, but I don't know that we have a directed engagement that you're talking about.
Would that be a model policy document maybe for the best practices working group to create as a template for enhancing community engagement? I mean, look, Don and John just did a great fundraising talk that's tied into that because it's tied to getting the community to help support their units. So
it's hard though.
Oh.
Steve, it's hard. It's hard to commit that kind of thing to something regular, because you got to remember that these guys are being pulled off the street to go do a demo somewhere. And while there used to be a day and a time when that was acceptable all the time, nowadays it's you got to be out on the street working.
I get it. I get it. But see, that's an executive decision, and so this is one of those penny wise and pound foolish things where it's like when budget comes, what's one of the first units in the department that gets cut? Training.
Oh.
I've watched it happen time and time again where the budget gets tight and they suspend a whole bunch of training they were going to do for the rest of the year. No more money for training. You don't get to go. We're not going to do this in-house stuff. That's like going out in the woods with a dull saw. If you're going to go cut down a tree, you better sharpen the saw. And that's what this training is. So that's it. We're getting ready to wrap up. We're in an hour and a half on this. So
Yep.
I'm just going to throw this up really quickly for people to think about this. This is what we need to think about, folks. Please send us your suggestions about the kinds of things you want us to work on in the coming 4 years to help life better for Police Canine. All right, 2026 through 2029 are going to be banner years. I think 2025, we're going to make some headway. And I think we need to maintain momentum by having plans for years 2, 3, 4, and 5 going forward on this. And we're looking for your support on this. The basic vehicles are still going to be the same, but what are the topics you want to cover? That's what we want to know. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move this on, leave this up here for a sec. This is your best practices working group. We've had some of the members here today, and we're going to be wrapping up. Don, do you have anything you want to add before we're gone?
I don't. I think we've said a lot today. I think the biggest things we're putting out is we're trying to reach out to make sure we're doing good, making sure our certifications are doing well. The small videos that Steve talked about is a big deal. They're just little informational tidbits that maybe the big department people already know, but that some of the smaller departments are not getting that information. So when we put it out in our newsletters and things like that, but we are here for all police dogs, not just USPCA. Thank you, Steve.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Don.
Take care, everybody.
All right.